Welcome, Annie Collins here. Today we're going to create this beautiful summery looking card. Let's go to the products I used to create this card. The new stencil called Heatwave, and this is supposed to give you a nice replica of the sun, or it could work as a flower as well. It's very pretty. It has the center open here, so a circle and all these beautiful scallops around it, and then images going out, flames or rays, as you would like to, if you would like to call it that. All right, we're also going to bring in the Spring Sayings die set. We're going to use the word shine and the shadow die for it. And we're also going, here's the word shine and here's the shadow die. We're also going to use one of these stitched rectangles that are in here. We're going to use that to cut down our panel. I went ahead and cut our words and shadow out already. It's from Not Your Mama's cardstock in white. I cut the word shine, and the shadow I cut out from some vellum. We're going to use our embossing ink and our embossing powder in Gilded, and we will be using the following. We're going to use our Aqua pigments in orange and in penny, which is like a nice metallic color. We're going to bring in a little Chroma mist in bumblebee yellow, and then we're going to bring in some glitter glaze in gold. So you guessed it, we're going to make a nice sunny card. We're going to use the stencil just as is, as the sun. Alright, so we're going to bring in from Not Your Mama's cardstock. I have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece of cardstock, which we're going to use our die to trim down to the size. And from Not Your Mama's cardstock, I made a card base, which is a A2 card base, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So we're going to stencil on our cardstock here. To use our stencil and our aqua pigments, we're going to bring in our stick and stamp mat and our add-on pigment mat as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to remove our liner that covers our mat, and we're going to adhere, we're going to stick down, I should say, not adhere, our white cardstock. We're going to put our palette on the top. I'm going to press down our stencil, get it centered as best as possible here, and I'm going to have the mat hold our stencil in place. That's what it's designed for, to eliminate all the excess glues or sprays or anything else. So now we're going to put a little drop of our orange aqua pigment, and now I'm going to shake up a little bit of our penny aqua pigment, and I'm just going to go ahead and use the palette here, and I put the orange in the orange, and then I just picked any of the other colors. I believe that's the pink. I put our penny in. We're going to use some brushes today to add our color to our stencil. So we're going to start off with our Chroma mist in bumblebee yellow. Now you can put this on your pigment mat. You can just put little drops on it. But I'm just going to dip my brush into the bottle, and I'm just going to quickly brush it on. And I want those brush strokes to kind of show through. I'm not going for smooth. I'm just going to have that on there. I want, like I said, the brush strokes to show through the stencil. And I'm going to give that a quick wash all the way around. I'm going to mat up any of the excess with a paper towel. Get our Chroma mist set aside, and now I'm going to go into the orange. I'm just going to, again, brush that on. I want to give those kind of ray feelings, so when you look at the sun, it almost looks like there's little lines coming from it. So that's what I'm trying to get on here. So now I'm going to dip into the penny, and I'm going to do the same thing, just brush it on. But I am going to go sort of in a circular motion when it comes to the center, because I want to define that circle a little bit more. Once I have that all on, I do the same thing. Get up any of the excess with a napkin, or I should say a paper towel. I want to put in just a little bit more yellow. I lost a little bit in one section here, and it got a little darker than I wanted. So I'm going to add a little more yellow to that. Excuse me. And next, I repeat the process of wiping everything off, so that when I go to place my glitter glaze on top, I don't get any of that yellow or orange smearing across. So I'm going to use a stiff bristle brush to to add our glitter glaze. And I'm only going to add this to the center of our sun here. Just going to go around, brush it across, define the circle a little bit more. And once that's done, I close up my glitter glaze, making sure to put that little plastic lid that comes in it inside back in to keep our glaze nice and moist. I'm going to remove our panel from our stick and stamp mat and let it dry. Just going to set it to the side. I'm going to clean our mat and stencil using our matte cleaning spray here, and I'm going to use that even on my stencil. There isn't a lot on here, but I don't want that glitter glaze to adhere to it. So I'm going to quickly use a paper towel to wipe off any of that spray, and I'll set that aside. Our mat will get sticky again and our stencil will dry. I'm going to bring in my heat tool to kind of speed up the heating process or the drying process of our panel. I'm not going to dry it completely, just going to dry it most of the way, and then I'll set it to the side to finish drying while we continue with our project. So I like to heat from both sides. That helps minimize our warping. So now that that's pretty much dry, we're going to work on our sentiment. For our sentiment, I'm just going to use our embossing ink here, and if you're not familiar with embossing ink, it's basically a sticky ink that will help your embossing powder adhere to it, so that you can then heat set the embossing powder to it's a nice shiny smooth. So I brought in a scratch piece of paper or a scrap piece of paper here so that I can pour my embossing powder on it, and again I'm using the Gilded, which is a nice gold color. I'm going to shake off any of the excess. I'm just going to grab my tweezers to do so. I will funnel back all of my embossing powder into the jar. And then we're going to heat set our sentiment really quickly. So I'm going to grab my tweezers to hold this and my heat tool. And we're just going to heat set this until our embossing powder is nice and smooth. So it goes from a dull or a matte gold to a nice shiny golden color. Once that's all done, I'm going to hit that little spot where my tweezers were. Once that's all done, then we're going to adhere this to our shadow. And again, I cut the shadow out of some vellum. So while I'm giving my sentiment a minute to cool off because it's still a little hot, I'm going to run my panel through my die cutting machine so that I have that nice edge to it. So I'm going to now adhere our sentiment to our shadow, which is made out of vellum, like I said. I'm going to use some Barely Art glue. I'm just putting a little dots or a little bit behind it. You don't need a lot. This is really good quality glue, so it will hold nicely. And we also don't want it to be oozing out and getting onto our vellum. So we're going to hold that down, press it down, and that's going to go into the center of our card. So now I'm going to bring in my card base, and I'm going to adhere our panel to our card base. And I was thinking of doing it directly, but it's a little warped, and I want to also give a little dimension to it. So I'm going to bring some really thin craft foam. I picked this stuff up at my local Dollar Tree. It's really, and I mean thin, so it'll give just a slight height to our panel. So it's not a lot of bulk, but it does make a difference. So I'm going to trim this down so it can fit just behind our panel. And I'm going to use some of our tear tape here to adhere this to our panel. So I put 3 pieces of it on the back. I remove the backing. I'm going to adhere our foam to the back of this. Put some more tear tape on the back of that. And I also put a little bit of the Barely Art glue. That just helps me get a little wiggle room to make sure I have my panel centered. It's not necessary, the tear tape will hold, but I don't always get everything centered. So I like using the wet glue because it gives me a little time to just get that centered on there. So like I said, I'm going to put a little bit of the Barely Art here. And then I will place this panel onto our card base, getting it centered. And when I use the die, it trims off about 1/8 of an inch all the way around, so it gives you this really nice white matte. This is a really light and airy kind of card. And it's pretty simple. I mean, it's just a stencil with our aqua pigment and chroma mist and a little glitter glaze, and it gives such a great impact. All right, so now we're going to adhere our sentiment, putting again using some Barely Art glue. I'm putting it just behind the word, trying not to get any on our vellum, because that will show through. I'm going to put some acrylic blocks on there to hold it in place, and then I'm going to grab a few crystals here, and well, gems actually, and I have two in this golden color, and then I have some in like a creamy white color. So I'm going to put 2 gold towards the bottom, and then 1 white and 1 gold towards the top left hand corner. So I have it going in a diagonal, top left to right bottom, and our card is complete. Pretty simple, pretty easy. You can mass produce these if needed, and it's nice to have just something simple like an encouragement card like Shine. So let's go over again our products that we use. We use our Heatwave stencil. We use some chroma mist in bumblebee yellow, aqua pigments in penny and in orange, glitter glaze in gold, embossing powder in gilded, our embossing ink, and of course our spring saying dies. We use the Shine and the rectangle to cut our panel down. But like always, I'll have everything in the description box below. Thank you for being here. I hope you found some inspiration.